Welcome to the Explainer. Let's just dive right into this, because today we're embarking on what is essentially an incredible philosophical detective story. We're going to investigate the unseen underlying machinery of our very own minds to uncover exactly how we actually know that we exist.
Now, I know that sounds like a ridiculously simple question, but it's actually the ultimate paradox of the human experience. I mean, we spend our entire lives experiencing the universe through the lens of our minds, right? But how do you actually know you exist? We use our minds every single second to observe the physical world around us, but it is notoriously difficult to turn around and observe the mind itself. It's kind of like trying to look directly at your own eye without using a mirror.
So, the core philosophical divide we're exploring today is just fascinating. Imagine a massive fork in the road. Over on one side, we have the scholastic path, which basically argues we have to catch ourselves in the act of thinking to figure out we're here. And then, on the other side, you've got the intuitive path. This one claims self-awareness is just an ever-present, built-in feature of the mind itself, illuminated from within. So which path is right? Well, let's find out.
Here is a quick cognitive roadmap for today's explainer. We're going to start with the core puzzle, move into how we actually know we exist, and then dive into the heavy lifting of deducing our true essence. After that, we'll look at some contrary views, and finally, harmonize the mind with reality.
All right, Section 1. The core puzzle. Searching for the unknown.
The ancient philosopher Plato outlined this really massive hurdle for us. How can we possibly search for the nature of our own minds if we don't even know what we're looking for? To get a grip on this, think about two drastically different approaches using everyday tech. René Descartes took an approach that's a lot like an always-on smartphone. He completely believed we have innate ideas, like a pre-installed operating system that's just running in the background, totally aware of itself. But the scholastic thinkers, they view the human mind at birth like a completely blank hard drive. It's totally dark and completely unaware of itself until some sort of external action triggers it to boot up.
Which brings us right into Section 2, knowing that you exist, the immediate flash.
So, the medieval scholastics actually had a highly specific term for this raw, basic realization. They called it an est, the instantaneous, completely undeniable knowledge that we exist. And it's crucial to note, this is completely separate from knowing what we actually are. Take a dormant mind, for instance. If you're in a total sensory void with absolutely zero input, the scholastics argue your mind is essentially asleep. But the exact second you perform a mental operation, like looking at a tree or hearing a dog bark, boom, your awareness flares into existence. You perceive your existence easily and instantly. There is literally zero logical reasoning required to know that you are here.
Think of it like a dark room that's rigged with a motion sensor. You don't realize you exist by sitting perfectly still in a dark void, meditating on the inner nature of your soul. You realize you exist because you catch your brain actively imagining a hot, cheesy slice of pizza. Or, even simpler, when you stub your toe in the dark. You don't pause, hold your throbbing foot, and logically deduce, I feel pain. Only existing things feel pain. Therefore, I must exist. No way. You just yell and hop around. The awareness of your existence is baked directly into the action itself.
Let's move to Section 3, Deducing True Essence. Enter the philosophical detective.
Now, knowing that you exist is only half the puzzle. We are now shifting our whole investigation from est, that we are, to quidest, what we actually are in our essence. Because we can't just casually stare directly at our own souls. Thomas Aquinas and the scholastics say we have to work backward using a very specific three-step engine. Step 1, you perceive an external physical object in reality, let's say a coffee mug. Step 2, your intellect performs the active, entirely invisible operation of understanding that mug. Step 3, by recognizing that active understanding, we can then deduce the hidden power of our intellect. We literally have to interact with the physical world first just to wake up our internal software.
This whole process is the scholastic engine. It's a completely mediated process. An operation leads to conscious perception, which then leads to a step-by-step deduction of our essence. The soul absolutely does not know itself immediately. It's basically a locked room mystery. Imagine you wake up inside a sealed room with total amnesia. You have to analyze the clues your mind leaves behind just to figure out the nature of the machinery you're working with.
So what exactly are those clues? Well, imagine a locked factory that's just spitting out ice cubes. You know for a fact there's a freezing mechanism inside, even if you can't see the machines. Our bodies produce measurable physical outputs, right? Sweat, tears, brain signals. They have weight, size, and location, which proves our physical biology. But our minds? They produce immaterial outputs,
things like universal concepts, advanced math, or the perfect idea of justice. You cannot put justice on a scale. So, the scholastics deduce that if our mind regularly produces invisible, weightless, permanent ideas, the source of those ideas, the core of our being, must also be an immaterial, subsistent soul.
Okay, Section 4. Built-in awareness and the contrary views. Now, as you might guess, not everyone agrees with this intense detective work. There is a massive philosophical battle taking place here. On one side, we've got the scholastic blank slate and their maze of mediated reasoning. They firmly insist we need the physical world as a mirror to know ourselves. But on the flip side, thinkers like St. Augustine and Descartes argue for innate ideas and a direct bullseye of revelation. They totally believe self-awareness is an immediate, always-on intuition. You don't need to stare at a coffee mug to know your essence. It's just hard-coded into you right from the start. Let's quickly break down these contrary views. St. Augustine championed what he called the presence principle, arguing the soul is immediately present to itself, bathed in this sort of divine light. A few centuries later, Descartes famously isolated himself in a stove-heated room, literally shutting out the physical world entirely, just to find his innate, I think, therefore I am. And then you have modern phenomenologists like Jean-Paul Sartre, who argued for pre-reflective awareness. Sartre said, hey, if you're counting cigarettes on a table, you don't need a secondary higher-order thought to realize you are counting. The self-awareness is just built right into the background hum of the experience itself.
Now, this reliance on pure intuition evolved even further as we entered the modern era. Thinkers in modern psychology really began to prioritize pure irrational emotion and highly subjective feelings over objective intellectual logic as the ultimate proof of the soul. But the scholastics wave a massive warning flag right here. They argue that without the intellect to anchor us to reality, we run a huge risk of falling into total subjectivism, where truth just becomes whatever you happen to feel in that exact moment.
Which brings us to our final stop today, Section 5, Harmonizing Mind and Reality.
So how do we balance this incredible, weightless intellect with our highly physical bodies? Honestly, this core philosophical divide across history is really just a huge disagreement over how much cognitive work is actually required to find the soul. On one far end, you have Augustine's pure, unmediated intuition. In the middle, you've got Descartes and Sartre with their built-in awareness. But on the other end, the scholastics provide this beautifully grounded middle path. They save us from pure physical materialism by proving we definitely have an immaterial intellect, but they keep us tied to objective reality, absolutely insisting we need the physical world to act as the mirror that awakens our self-knowledge.
So, what should you actually take away from all this? I want you to remember this really powerful thought. Every single time you grasp a complex idea or understand a universal truth, you are actively participating in an immortal dimension of yourself. Seriously, think about that. Your everyday intellectual acts, whether it's solving a math problem, feeling genuine empathy, or even just following the logic of this explainer, are literal, undeniable proof of your own incredible, non-physical nature.
And I want to leave you with one final, lingering question to chew on today. If the scholastics are right, and we inherently need the outside world, physical objects, and everyday friction to trigger our self-awareness, what happens to our true essence when we completely disconnect from objective reality? As our modern culture isolates itself more and more into subjective feelings and digital bubbles, are we actually losing touch with the very mechanism that allows our minds to know themselves in the first place? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Look inward, engage with the real world around you, and as always, keep exploring.